It's Mark chapter 6. It's the feeding of the 5,000. And yet then there's also, right after that, the walking on the water. But leading up to it is important, and it's the setting. At the beginning of chapter 6, Jesus goes into Nazareth, his hometown, and he's preaching, and it says that they were amazed at the teaching, but then began to question, isn't this Jesus? Like, this can't be, he's just the carpenter's son. And so they have this disbelief, even though they were amazed at his teaching. And it says that then Jesus, was amazed at their unbelief, and he marveled of their unbelief. So they were amazed initially at his teaching, but then they said, this can't be, this is just Jesus. And he marveled at their unbelief and only did a few miracles there. Well, so you see, Jesus ends up kind of getting rejected in his own hometown. Then the next section, verse 7 in chapter 6, Jesus then gathers the disciples, the 12, and he commissions them to go out. And so he's sending them out to go preach repentance. The kingdom of God is near. He tells them they don't need to take a bunch of extra stuff. It's going to be a very, what you've got on, pretty much go. Don't stay at multiple houses. You're not going to wear it out. You're not going to get a better offer and go there. You're going, you stay, you preach. If they don't like it, you've said your piece, you've given the warning, you've preached, you can shake your shoes off. It was a demonstration to the culture, usually to the Gentiles by the Jews. After they would leave some Gentile territory, they would shake their shoes off. Kind of we're shaking the dust and the uncleanliness off from that. They said if they don't like what you're preaching, demonstrate that and then leave. But you go, Jesus just got rejected, and now he's sending us out. If you're the disciples, okay, the stakes are up a little bit. Wow, this message might not be very popular. Think about what that might do as far as in the emotional level for these disciples and spiritual. And then Mark does a weird thing, kind of, and he devotes a pretty good chunk to the killing of John the Baptist next. And so he puts the narrative on pause and comes back to it after, but in between he puts John the Baptist and the death of him and how that happens. And it seems kind of out of place, but when you think about it, here's this message that Jesus is sending the disciples out to preach. And by the way, he wasn't accepted in his own hometown. He's sending them out, and John the Baptist, who was preaching repentance, he's now dead. There's this buildup of the significance of this message. And it's also a section now that we begin where Jesus is training the 12. And so it's set up here, and he's training them, and he's sending them out. And it's saying this isn't going to be easy. There may be spiritual opposition. You're going to be busy doing ministry. It's going to weigh on you emotionally, maybe. But here's what's going on. And so with that, then, we get into our passage this morning where Jesus, in verse 30 of chapter 6, if you have your Bibles turned there, it says, the apostles returned to Jesus, having been out, and then we've had this little side narrative of John the Baptist, and told him all that they had done and taught. Almost as a gathering, you can imagine, it's probably pretty exciting. Because as they went out, they had authority over evil spirits, they were teaching, and then they come back, and they had been entrusted with a lot, and they were able to do a lot, and they're coming back, and they're telling Jesus all that had gone on. I can imagine it's exciting. And they're very excited. Wow, you wouldn't imagine what happened here, or this. Gosh, we didn't know. Wow, this was amazing. And they're coming back, and they're telling Jesus all that had happened. Now, Jesus, being a good shepherd, he said to them, come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest a while. Jesus knew where they were. He knew their condition. He knew what they had been doing. He knew that it wasn't easy. He knew they were busy. And in that knowledge and in his compassion and concern for them, Jesus says, come away. you guys need to rest. Now, we don't know what Jesus was doing during this time, but undoubtedly, there were always people around him, and so he probably needed rest as well. But he's looking out for his disciples. And so Jesus, when he's with the disciples and training them and understanding what life may have going on with them and what all is happening, he knows where they are and what they need. School's just started. It's exciting time, but undoubtedly, it's busy. It's going to get busy. Things get going. Everything's kicking off. We're throwing financial peace at you and church fellowships and everything else. It's fun. There's going to be a time where some of you are going to come up for air. Some of you more so than others. There's a good bunch of you here that are probably extroverts, and you are energized by people. And you love to be around people, and you can be tired, but then you get around and you're in charge. And then there's some of you who, I won't make you raise your hand, are introverts. I'm one. Love people, love things, but I get energized by being alone. And so sometimes these needs for rest, I might feel it before somebody else might and have to think, is this truly a need of mine or what? Jesus knows what's going on in life and where you are and all the things that are going on. And the thing about it is he's concerned, and he knows that when life gets, and ministry and all the stuff, when it gets overwhelming, that we need to trust him to provide rest. Matthew 11:28-30 Jesus said, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Jesus is saying, I know, I'm asking you to come to me, and I will provide rest. We think about how many ways we try to provide rest for ourselves. Sometimes just a vegging out or whatever it might be, and just through situations. But let me ask you, how often do you go to Christ for rest? In the midst of the busyness, do you seek it through situations or lack of, just vegging spent to recharge? Sabbath has become a day off, but ultimately, it was a day spent to recharge and God to be the sufficiency there. To abstain from work and get rest, but also a focus to be upon God. And a lot of times we just take it as a day off, weekend days and different things, and sometimes a Sunday doesn't work out for you from work or whatever, but whenever time comes where you're not having to work or you get some physical rest, do you seek Jesus during that? That he might nourish your soul as well as your body and your spirit. Well, the disciples, they come back and Jesus knows where they are. And so guess what? He says, all right, let's go get this rest. And it said, for many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. I mean, it was just constant people everywhere. And so they went away in a boat to a desolate place by themselves. Sounds good. Where are they going to land? Nice little boat ride, except verse 33. This is where you insert the dun-dun-dun kind of thing. It says, now many saw them going and recognized them and got ahead of them. And so the people, they're ready to go on the boat, and all the masses, they see that they're going, and it's like word spreading, and the people are following on the shore, coming out from the towns, word's getting out. You can imagine that they're kind of, where are we going to go? Supposed to head, and the people are there. I thought we were going to get some rest. I mean, this is nice in the boat, but they were going to go to a desolate place. But the people are going. And when they get to the shore, the people are there. Sometimes that rest doesn't come like you think it would. But Jesus said, let's go get rest. So why didn't he plan for this? Sometimes God's like, hang on. And like I said earlier, this passage, there's a training of the 12. And one of the things is that, yes, they need rest, but he's sending them out. But then there's some other things that are going to take priority here. And he's going creating them a need for Him. When they get to the shore, all the people are there. I saw Dave Cribbs here, and I was thinking back. We used to live in a building called the Hangar at Denton Bible Church, and we were interns for the youth ministry there, and Sundays were the busiest of days. And so we would have a leaders meeting in the morning, and then we'd have the Sunday youth service with a few hundred kids. And then after that, we'd probably go to lunch with a group of kids and leaders, and sometimes there was flag football going on in the afternoon. And then the 6 o'clock evening service was kind of church for us. But after that was a Bible study. And then we would go to Bible study. And we would get home at 9 or 9:30, and it was a busy day. And then at the time, I was in seminary, and so between Friday classes and Monday classes, I had about 200 pages to read and Greek stuff to study and go through. And so Saturday, most likely it wasn't going to happen. And so here came Sunday night, ready just to unwind a little bit and then hit the books. But there's a phenomenon in Denton known as the Mingo Triangle. And while we were right at Nottingham and Mingo, you remember this? It seemed like there were more breakdowns that took place at Nottingham and Mingo. And remember, we get home one night, it's like, gonna rest and just unwind before getting on with books and stuff. And then there's this banging on the door. And it was the front door. Nobody came to the front door. They went to the side door. I was like, what in the world? And somebody go to it, and sure enough, somebody's broke. And you know, I think about the disciples getting off the boat here on the shore and what they must have been feeling like. I thought we were going to get rest. And all that their attitudes might have been thinking. This person knocking at the door, of course, they were broke down. You know, the flesh is going, hey, are you a member of AAA? You want to call them? I got a phone here, you know, or whatever. But I'm sure, you know, it was something, flat tire, or they needed to use the phone and something. And so sure enough, and this seemed like it happened often. And the rest I thought I was going to get, we thought, you know, there'd be something that comes up. But it was a good thing. It just wasn't what we had planned. Well, in the text here, they get off the boat and the crowds are there. And so in verse 34, they went to the shore and saw a great crowd, and Jesus had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. Jesus looks at them, and of course, being Jesus and being God and having compassion, He looks at them and says, these people have no one to lead them. Look what they're doing. They're going on the shore following us just to get taught, to experience the Son of God. Whether they fully know who He is, they're enamored, they're amazed, they're intrigued, they've heard the stories. The disciples had been out, and maybe even from that and the work that they had done, the reputation, they were going on behalf of Jesus, and things are happening. The people want to see Jesus, and He has compassion on them. And so what does He do? They went to the shore, and He has compassion, and He began to teach them many things. And when it grew late, this is probably 3 p.m. to 6 p.m., the disciples came to Him and said, this is a desolate place, and the hour is now late. Send them away to go into the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat. Remember, they were going to go to a desolate place to rest. And the disciples say, yeah, this is a desolate place. This is where we need to be, but not with them. Get them out of here. It's late, you know, and they have good reasons for it. There's not enough food. And if they don't get in, you know, probably by 6, all the shops in the countryside, all these little places are going to close. They're not going to be able to buy food. And so for the well-being of the people, we probably need to get them out of here. What do you say, Jesus? Huh? Come on. I mean, we've already gotten our rest delayed, and you had to go on teaching, which was awesome. but we didn't get our rest, remember? You ever think in those positions? The most inconvenient thing comes to you and it interrupts your time. It happens to me often. And I find out how selfish I am. And I can usually try to justify it in all kinds of ways, but usually it's coming back to I need or I want. So these disciples are saying, hey, we need to do this. What they're not saying is, Lord, these people are getting hungry. What do you want to do about this? But that's all right, because Jesus has an answer. So he says, they say, send him away. But he answered, in verse 37, he answered them, you give them something to eat. Even more wind out of the sails. I was afraid he's going to say that. You give them something to eat. Lord. So they got an answer for that. And they said to him, shall we go buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give it to them to eat? Now, a day's wage was a denarius, and it probably was about 8 months of a laborer's wages. These guys are just fishermen, so this would take 8 months. Think about 8 months of wages, of salary. And what we've got here, when we find out later, it's 5,000 men, plus women and children. Some people say it's up to 15,000. Who knows? But it's more than 5,000, and there's a lot of people. And so it's going to cost a whole lot. So they're rationalizing here. Hey, this is going to cost about 8 months' wages just to feed the people. Backing up that you need to send them out. And he said to them, how many loaves do you have? Go and see. They didn't have any. But he says, go and see. And when they had found out, they said, we have 5 and 2 fish. And then Jesus takes over. He's already been in control, but this situation about feeding them and the disciples wanting to, they have their solution for it. They've calculated all the reasons why these people need to go, all the things that, this is impossible. How are we going to feed them? Lord, you're asking the impossible. And Jesus, in this situation, he says, basically, now you need to trust me to provide the resources. He suggested that the disciples feed the people because he wanted them to realize their inability to do so. And so once they realized their inability, it would make a greater impression on him of who he was as he can reveal himself to them, and that he was different. Their response shows that they have not yet begun to look at Jesus for all of their needs. They're calculating all the ways in that these needs cannot be met among the people and why they can't do it. But they're not seeking him out. And instead of asking him to provide what the people needed, they calculated the cost of the food, concluded that they could not afford to pay for it, and that's it. But Jesus says, go and see what we've got. And so we've just got that. And verse 38, he commanded them all to sit down in groups on the green grass. Springtime, Pentecost was coming. Not Pentecost, the Passover feast was coming. So it's green grass, nice place. They're there. He says, break them up into groups. And then they broke into groups by hundreds and fifties. And taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven, said a blessing, broke the loaves, and gave them to the disciples before the people, to set before the people. And he divided the 2 fish among them all. And they all ate and were satisfied. We don't know the details of what happened. He took it, he gave thanks for it, and then he handed it out to the disciples and began to hand it, and they took it and they kept doing it. We don't know at what point the basket was full, at what point there was always another. We just know what happened. Confirmed by the fact that they all ate and were satisfied. And they took up 12 baskets full of broken pieces and of the fish. And of those who ate were 5,000 men. Now, in some of the previous miracles and stories, there was always seems a response. They were amazed at this or astounded at this. There's nothing here yet, because this is dealing with the disciples. And that's why the next section is important, because it's going to refer back to this. The disciples witnessed something amazing. They kept delivering bread and fish, and the multitudes got fed. Amazing. And they had calculated every way and why that wouldn't be able to happen, and yet Jesus showed this can happen through me. I've got it. So Jesus, this is one of the most important miracles, one of the biggest miracles. Every gospel includes this one. So it's astounding, and yet there's no mention of a reaction from the people or of the disciples. But it moves in to the next verse. And it says immediately in verse 45, Jesus, he made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, to Bethsaida, while he dismissed the crowd. Remember that issue of rest? Remember when Jesus said, hey, you guys are tired, let's go to a desolate place and rest a while. Remember the crowds beat them there. Remember this time of teaching. Remember the hungry people, and they're ready to get rid of them. They hadn't gotten their rest yet. And there's so many people there. And what does Jesus do? He demonstrates himself as a servant leader. And he says, get out of here. Y'all go. I got this. He sends them off, and he dismisses the crowd. I don't know about you, but that is huge. Have you ever had a boss or someone over you that had your back like that? That knew what you were going through and stepped up? You needed medical leave, or you needed some time off or whatever, or they covered you in a conflict or something going on. For Jesus to take these disciples whom he has sent out in ministry, he knows where they're at. And he knows they didn't get that rest. But he says, go. I'll dismiss that. Showing servant leadership. Jesus says later, I haven't come as the world in authority to lord it over you, but in humility to serve, not to be served, but to serve and to give my life as a ransom for many. He demonstrates it as he interacts with the disciples, training them, sending them on these things, but also showing them that he has the power because they're passionate for where they are, but he can also meet the needs because he has the power because of being the Son of God to not only be concerned, but to do something. Well, so he dismisses the crowds, and after he had taken leave of them, he went up to the mountain to pray. Times where we see Jesus retreat to the mountain to pray. This is a side note, there's some of you who may have time with God in the morning, and then there's some of you who may have time with God in the day or some at night. I remember being in a class and a professor said, how many of you have morning quiet times? And a bunch of hands raise up. And how many of you have quiet times at night? A few hands kind of went up. And he was like, how many of you feel guilty for having quiet times at night? Because what had been ingrained in us was Jesus got up while it was still dark to go pray. And so that has to be it, always. And yet, we find at the end of a long day, Jesus, he's been teaching. He's been doing miracles. He's been going. He dismisses the crowds. And then he goes up to the mountain to pray. And the point was, a quiet time is not a time or a place, it's a person. And that Jesus needed time with the Father, he went. Whether it was morning, whether it was day, whether it was evening, at the end of a long day, he goes up and he prays. And when evening came, the boat was out on the sea, and he was alone on the land, and he saw that they were making headway painfully, for the wind was against them. They had been on the Sea of Galilee. They were on the northeast shore where this happened, and they were going to go over to the northwest shore. And so he sent them ahead to go there. But the winds were strong enough that these guys are fishermen. They're pretty good with a boat. But it's blowing them, and it's blowing them down, and they're struggling. It's about 3 miles across, so if Jesus is up on the mountain, he can look across, and he might be able to see them out there. And he sees that they're struggling, and the wind was against them. And so about the 4th watch of the night, this is 3 to 6 a.m. Remember, he probably sent them out at about 6 p.m. So they've been going, and they've been struggling for a while. Not really getting that rest, maybe. And about the 4th watch of the night, he came to them, walking on the sea. He meant to pass by them, but when they saw him walking on the sea, they thought it was a ghost and cried out. For they all saw him and were terrified. Now he's walking beside them, and it says that he was, some versions say, intending to pass by, like he was going to bypass them. I think it's just more he was walking by. And as he's going by, they see him. They are terrified, thinking it's a ghost, because why? You'd freak out too if you saw someone walking on the water and it was Jesus and you hadn't seen him, and there he is, and yet they're terrified. They don't get it. But they're terrified, but immediately he spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." See, when they're amazed and terrified, Jesus comes in and he calms. He knows where they are, and he says, "Hey, it's me. No fear." And he got into the boat with them, and the wind ceased, and they were utterly astounded, for they had not understood about the loaves, but their hearts were hardened. They were utterly astounded, which the phrase is, they were out of their minds. Minds blown. They couldn't, whoa. They thought it was a ghost. No, it really is Jesus. He's in the boat. The waves are gone. All is calm. All is well. Whoa. And it says, even though they were out of their minds, it says they didn't put it together and understand about the loaves because their hearts were hardened. And so there's this lesson that points back to the loaves. They didn't fully get who Jesus was. They may have been concerned about their own needs. Their hearts were hardened to not only know Jesus' compassion and his care, but his power to meet that need, to take care of them. And in this place, they didn't trust him enough to provide, they needed to trust him to provide reassurance of who he was. He knew he'd said he wanted to provide rest. Did they really trust him in his timing? Or was it on their terms? He provided resources, not what they thought would happen. They were calculating all the ways in which the multitude could not be fed. But Jesus took care of it. Did they get it? And now they're still struggling. And this rest that they were hopefully going to get at the beginning of the story, really, right now, the winds go calm. And only when Jesus gets in the boat. They don't understand who Jesus is, what he can do, and how that affects their hearts. They're still, and we go later on in Mark, and they're still not getting some of this stuff. It's easy to look back with understanding that we have, or being indwelt with the Holy Spirit, and think, gosh, the disciples, a bunch of knuckleheads. Why didn't I get it? He was walking on the water. I would immediately said, "Oh, you're the Son of God," right? Right, yeah. How many times in my daily life do I think, this is something that's pretty overwhelming. I know Jesus can probably do it, but I really don't think he can do this one. I don't think he can I'll give some prayer requests that I'm pretty sure He can answer, but these are big ones. I don't know, Lord, if it's Your will and you really think You can, it'd be great. How many times am I practically just like the disciples, hard-hearted? I seek all the ways that I can calculate the answers, and when they don't come out and I can't get it all right, then, I don't know. Been convicted this last week about things in my life that I have not truly gone to God and go, Lord, I know that You care about this in my life. You have a concern about things. I don't know how You would play it out, but I know You can also do it. How many of my prayers are safe versus going, Lord, I'm going to ask for the impossible. Like Jesus saying, You feed them. How? So often I'm like, how? Instead of, Lord, use me. Do whatever. When we were on our way to Malaga for the mission trip, we had two from our team that were meeting us. They were in Austin and were joining us. And so one of the ladies, Lynette, we were ready to check out, ready to go. And as she got up to the ticket counter, there was a complication because her passport wasn't going to be valid for the time after our trip that Spain wanted it to be. They need it for 3 months. In case something happens and you're commit a crime and you're in prison or whatever, that you've got to be valid enough for them to get you out. But they had that rule. Well, it was going to expire, and so they weren't going to allow her. We're there 2 hours before takeoff, so we can get on the plane, and it's a no-go for her. A lot of effort has gone into this. Trip, support raising, all kinds of things. So it's like, whoa. What are we going to do? All the calculations. What can we do in our own strength? Well, we come up with a plan, and really it's, all right, she's got to go get a passport. These things, she's got to go today. And not only that, she's got to go in the next few hours so she can get back because there's another flight that they will let her get on that day. If she doesn't get onto that one, it would cost a whole other flight to reschedule. But the lady at the ticket counter was so gracious. One of these that she got it. We're praying, and she was totally working. She didn't have to do what she did. She didn't even do a transfer or a change fee on this. But she said, there is a 4 o'clock flight. If you can be back here, you're on it. And we'll go ahead and send the luggage. And so she had her carry-on. She goes, we say goodbye, we pray, Lord, glorify Yourself, show off in this moment, please. And so we go on, we check in, and by the time then we get to where phones are shut off, we don't know what's going to happen. But we know if she catches that other flight, even then we may not meet up in Madrid before having to transfer and go to Malaga. Long story short, she gets an Uber, which she'd never done before, so I had to figure that out. She gets an Uber, got to go find, a little CVS to get a picture taken for the passport. Gets that, goes to this passport office, and then she's there and she realizes, oh no, the Uber driver was gracious in taking her to both places. But now she's in the office, and she left her bag in the Uber. This was going to take a while. He could be who knows where. And they don't give you a phone number to call the driver direct. So she's like, I don't know how to get hold of him. He's got my bag in his car. I'm trying to get this taken care of. Well, he calls her. He had her number, and he could do that. He's like, hey, I got it. He comes, he gets her. She gets her passport done. Gets back to the airport, is able to get on that plane. But that plane, when it lands, there is less than an hour for her to transfer from the terminal where she lands to the terminal for domestic flights to Malaga. We made that little trip through the airport, and it took about an hour to get through there. It's like, whoa. Well, her plane lands early. We're getting ready to go to our gate in Madrid to go to Malaga, and who shows up but Lynette? And she's with us. And all these things that had to take place, God showed off. The flight was early. Everything worked out. Was it inconvenient? Yeah. Is God always convenient? No. Is He always on time as far as our standard? No. But just like the disciples, He has a purpose. He's training. He's putting through things. And it was a beautiful way for God to show off then. Feeding the 5,000, walking on water, is a beautiful way for the Son of God to show off. But more importantly, to let the disciples know that they can trust Him to provide the rest. It may not come in their own way, but the rest is through Jesus. He can handle the resources. He knows what's going on. He can give the reassurance of who He is that we would learn. Ephesians says, now to Him who is able to do more, far more abundantly than all that we ask or think, according to the power that is working within us. 2 Corinthians, Paul says, Jesus said to him, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. For when I am weak and I don't have it all figured out, or I feel at the end of my rope, guess what? Christ's power is made perfect. Hebrews says He is our rest. Find that He not only cares and is compassionate towards His disciples, to the multitudes, but to us. He knows what's going on in your life. He knows the situations you're going through that may seem overwhelming. And not only does He care, but He has the power to take care of it and do whatever. How many of those things do we fully trust Him to do?